So I wanted to take a second. Alan, thank you so much for yesterday. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. A lot of good stuff there. I had one question. Can you help me understand just what you were talking about? I'm kidding. Very informative and thought-provoking. And also Steve, he makes this look easy. This is not easy. He's a logistics guy, but he spends an awful lot of time getting all this stuff buttoned up so we don't run out of ice or napkins or whatever. So just want to say thanks to Steve. So, can you put the next slide up, Steve? Just the verse. So this was on the flyer. This was our theme this weekend. I guess one of the verses in the theme. It's Paul writing from prison to Colossae, I guess is how you pronounce that, Colossians 4:6, and this is the verse I'll be talking about a little bit today. I wanted to start off with a story about words, and it's a story of both honest words and a story of perhaps harsh words. And as it turns out, there's an elderly couple driving down the road, and next thing you know, the blue light's gone. So the elderly man pulls over, and a cop comes running up, license, registration, and the cop says, I caught you doing 80. He goes, 80? He said, I had my cruise control set at 60. And the wife goes, now honey, this car doesn't have cruise control. So the conversation continues, and cop's starts writing the ticket out. She goes, it's too bad your radar detector didn't work. He goes, sure, you realize radar detectors are illegal in this state. And I'm gonna have to cite you for that. So writes up another ticket. He goes, I noticed you don't have your seatbelt on. He goes, oh yeah, I had to unbuckle it to get my wallet out to give you my ID. And the wife goes, well, now that's not true. You never wear your seatbelt when you're driving. And he launches into her, shut up, woman. And the cop looks at the wife and goes, does he always talk to you this way? And she goes, no, only when he's been drinking. Honest words gone bad. So I was listening to a Joyce Meyer sermon. It had been, 8-10 years ago. And she speaks a lot on Proverbs, if anybody's ever listened to her. And one of the challenges she offered in this particular sermon was go through Proverbs and count the number of times it talks about your words. So I took the challenge. I've read Proverbs a dozen times, whatever, on the various studies we've had, and there are 73 instances in Proverbs that I counted about my words. That's a lot from the book of wisdom. 31 chapters, 73 instances about our words. There are also 139 instances about how you treat other people. Pretty powerful stuff there when you think about it. So I took this verse, and on Tuesday nights we do a cancer support group at the church, and I figured why not use them for my stuff here and plagiarize a little. And so we pulled this verse up, and I said, it's interesting with people with cancer, sometimes it's hard to talk to them, sometimes it's hard to receive those words, sometimes they learn to say things differently. There's all sorts of different things about words that come up. And we spent some time dissecting this, and I'll just be brief and tell you what we came up with. There's a few clauses here. Let your conversation be always, underlined, full of grace. Well, you have to ask yourself the question, what is grace? And John Lynch is in the group, and he likes Yancey and Stedman and some of those guys. And I think he was quoting Yancey. He said, he put this as there's three different parts to this. Justice, is when you get what you deserve. Mercy is when you don't get what you deserve. And grace is when you get something you probably didn't deserve. Or kind words. In this case, a kind word. Or an encouraging word, or whatever that may be. And we went on to talk about salt, seasoned with salt, which is kind of interesting for Paul to say about conversation, but it's a metaphor, obviously. But then you go into, well, what exactly is salt? Salt is sodium chloride. What does sodium do? Sodium retains water when we take it in. Water's life. Chloride cleanses, preserves. So I should be speaking life and preserving into my conversations when I'm talking to people. That's what that's telling us. And this last clause was just kind of out there. We spent a little time wrestling with that one, but ultimately came up with, so that you may know how to answer everyone, and then went back to always and said, well, maybe that's about alignment with God. Maybe the whole verse is about alignment with God. And maybe that's the way, maybe there's something there. So a little bit of time spent there on that, and there's a story about Kirk Cousins in focus and alignment that I was reading, and he's a quarterback in the NFL for the Deadskins or whatever, but cheap shot there. Anyway, so he had a problem with focus. So what they did is they put him in a room, and he liked Star Wars movies. They put this thing on him that would monitor his brain waves, and every time he would lose focus on the movie that he liked, the movie would shut off until he could get his brain back to focusing, and that helped train his mind. So it takes practice. Speaking of sports, my mom is a great sports fan, one of the greatest. She loves the Colts, and I love the Colts, and she's a big part of that. She loves Michigan. One of the rules in the house is thou shalt not root for Ohio State. I actually remember watching the 1980 hockey game with the U.S. team. Some of you are old enough to remember that. I mean, intense watching. They got to do it. They got to do it. And the last minute of the game as it winds down, and Al Michaels 10, 9, all the way down to 3, 2. Do you believe in miracles? And we're celebrating, and I'm 8 years old or whatever in the house. And what a great sports fan she was. So I wound up with the opportunity. I'm at a trade show in Vegas at work, and I get backstage, and I'm going to get to meet Peyton Manning, who I love. So not only Peyton, Archie as well. So I'm excited. I call him, you're not going to believe what I'm about to do. And so I go back there and, hey, how you doing? And it's no real conversation, just, hey, how you doing? And somebody snaps a shot. Well, now I've got a picture of one of the greatest events ever happened. And I call my mom, I'm like, this is going to be great. As soon as I get this picture, I'll send it to you, blah, blah, blah. And, a couple weeks go by. Ultimately, we get the picture back. Hey, can you flip over to the next slide?
Nice.
Oh, man. Oh, man. So I told her I'd send her the picture. So I sent her the picture, and her first words were, man, you blew that one. And she didn't mean it. I mean, she was just being funny. But and we had a good laugh about that. But the interesting thing is, even though I knew she was kidding, I remember exactly what she said. Too bad.
Never seen you look that small before.
Yeah. I'm behind him. The camera guy was about this tall, so it's perspective.
The camera took weight off you, added it on him.
I was a little sleepy that day, apparently. So places that we use our words all over the place, with each other, in situations, at work, at home, at play, on the road. Lots of different things we say, and situations come up in life sometimes that we speak to that are good or bad. So I wanted to kind of boil this down to a couple cases about words, and one of them is how we talk to each other, and the other is sort of critical situations in life. And I'll split those up and hopefully be able to articulate this with some sensible way. So when we're talking to other people, we can have a positive impact on them or a negative impact on them with our words, right? I mean, and a positive word is, as Proverbs 15:4 says, a soothing tongue is a tree of life. That's pretty powerful. My encouraging word to somebody else can really advance them. I can speak life into them. And I'd ask you to think about a time when someone encouraged you. Do you remember what they said? Do you remember how you felt? I remember being 6 years old. I played baseball my whole life. And my dad started teaching me, I guess when I was 2 or 3, and I wound up in my first Little League game, those farm leagues, what it was called in Chesapeake, and I was a third baseman, and I had this guy named Eric Penninger who was my manager. He was just a lineman, power lineman guy, but he would say stuff like, don't worry if you got on base, Jimmy will get him and come back around to third. And I remember that from when I was 6 years old. That's pretty powerful, speaking that life into somebody, and we all have that power to do that. On the flip side of that, negative words. Negative words. And sometimes negative words come out like when we're frustrated or angry, maybe just grumpy that day, and we say things sometimes we regret. Do you remember a time when maybe somebody said something negative to you? If you think about that, how'd you feel? Do you remember it well, right now, today? And how long ago was that? When you say things, sometimes people might be remembering things. That's something to think about. As we heard earlier, read in the book of James, the 3rd chapter. James is a great book, first of all. If you haven't read it, read it. It's a New Testament version of Proverbs. The 2nd verse says, it illustrates how hard it is to control the tongue. The 3rd verse talks about it being, the tongue is a bit in the mouth of a horse. It can guide the whole horse, or a rudder guiding a ship. Little things that guide big things. The tongue guides us. Words can come from the self, and sometimes that can be destructive. Verse 8 even goes so far as to say, you can't control this alone. You need something bigger. And it's alluding to the Holy Spirit there. You ever notice that the people we sometimes say words that we regret are often the closest to us? And that's because it's convenient. Or road rage. It's safe. I'm in my car. I can yell at that guy, but he's not going to hear the words I say. But unfortunately, just like Kirk Cousins, you're training your mind when you do that. Sometimes a corrective word is needed. And Steve, I don't know if we can go back to that verse. Is there a way to just click it over here? I wouldn't put that up. I don't know how to do it, but
Just the back arrow, Bob.
if somebody, whatever, just figure it out. But the corrective word sometimes is needed, but a lot of it is the delivery. And when you think about that verse, it's Colossians 4:6, and it talks about, okay.
We're gonna get there.
When you're correcting someone, seasoning with salt. What am I saying? That's good enough. Always full of grace, seasoning with salt when you're correcting somebody. Correction shouldn't come when you're really mad at somebody, because you're going to say some stuff you might regret. And yeah, it's frustrating. But like Kirk Cousins, you got to train your mind to stop. And one of the examples in the Bible I would reference would be Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a guy, and I don't know if you know the story, it's a great book, 13 chapters in the Old Testament. He was a cupbearer for King Artaxerxes. And he was a servant, so any sort of emotional flailing of any kind would cost him his life, because the king would suspect that something's wrong with the wine, he was going to get killed. So Nehemiah finds out back home is real bad, the walls are down in Jerusalem, and he's bummed out about it, and he's got to go tell the king, I want to go help those people out. The first thing Nehemiah did, anybody remember? Right. First thing, he stopped. His mind was trained for that. I would suggest that maybe with our words, might be prudent to do some of that. So other, critical times in life, I want you to think of a storm in your life. Could have been a job problem, a money problem. Maybe the medical report was bad. Remember that? What was your first reaction there to that? Probably maybe mad, maybe sad, maybe some sort of emotional reaction, and that's fine. That's to be expected, I think. But did that linger? I've known people that were in bad situations that just complain a lot about it. And they don't stop. And you want to console them, you want to help them out, but good grief, we've talked about this 6 times. And then you think about, well, what do you figure God thinks about that when that guy's complaining, or I'm complaining, or whatever the case may be? God is sovereign, right? He's in control of everything. Alan referenced Romans 8:28 yesterday. God works all things for good for those who love him and are called to his purpose. So clearly he's in control here, and I'm down here complaining. There's a gap there. Something's missing. Something to think about there. At any rate, then there's other people who can take a situation on, like being out of work, and they're always positive. We got a guy at church who was out of work. He had a big job, and he's working now, but he had a good-sized job and good check and family and great bridge and 2 girls going to college or whatever. And I never heard him complain about it. Never. He kept on tithing like he still had a job. Wrote it all the way down, almost broke. Never complained one time, I heard. And I was constantly talking to this guy. And, next thing you know, he's got a job offer in Tennessee, goes out there, sets up, we're going to build a house, get everything going out there, and then gets a phone call, and all that is stopped, and he gets a job locally, so he doesn't have to move his girls away from Great Bridge, away from the church. It's way more money, way more benefits, and it's better. God rewards those who are faithful to him. One of the things that, when I was sick last year, I had somebody tell me was, there's a couple places in the Bible, like Job, 42:10, I think it is, or Zechariah, and I'm going to get this wrong, but 9:12, where God talks about double for your trouble. You know, if you remain faithful to me, it may not be financial, but you're going to grow somehow. And it seems like that constantly gets proven true, especially for those that can train their mind to be focused on Him and not their situation. Another story, and I'll just read this, is 1 Samuel 17, and it starts at 45, and this is a story of David. He's going to fight Goliath. Anybody remember that one? And so I'll just read you the text here. You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals. The whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and He will give all of you into our hands. This is David, who's $150, wringing wet. Goliath's 9 feet tall, a couple hundred pounds of armor, and this is how he's talking to him. It's pretty bold, man. So the situations in life are like a Goliath, and maybe we feel like a David with 150 pounds ringing him up with a couple rocks, but that's how I want to be. Psalm 23:4 is another one. When I was sick, I would walk around saying it, and lo, I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, but I will fear no evil, for you are with me. I'm going to walk through the valley. We're not stopping here. We're going to conquer along the way, but I'm not stopping. When the money runs out, the job runs out, you're just going through it. Keep trucking. Isaiah 54:17, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. It also goes on to talk about this is our heritage. This is what's in us now. We can be conquerors. So how do I fix this? These negative things that keep coming out of my mouth. I mean, James 3:8 flat out says you're not going to fix it alone. And the answer is focus. God can get us there. There's a number of places in the Bible that talks about what God can do for us. One of them that came to mind was Galatians 5:22 and 23, which talks about the fruit of the Spirit, which is joy, love, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. See that in there? Maybe we need to do like Kirk Cousins and work on getting focused. We can choose to be positive. Closing a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time and the fellowship and just getting to hang out together and with you. We thank you for growing us and teaching us. And I pray that you be with each of us as we go today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.